Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another incredible Color of Science digital edition. My name is Frederick Bertley. I'm the president and CEO of COSI. It's such a pleasure to host another edition of the Color of Science digital edition. We have an incredibly special guest today, so we're going to get to that. But before I get to that, I do have to share answers to questions that I've been getting all day. You might be wondering why I'm wearing a Black Panther t-shirt, a Marvel cap, and of course I got Captain America's shield behind, because COSI, November 26th, that's Thanksgiving Friday, until May 30th, that's Memorial Day weekend, COSI is hosting Marvel, a universe of superheroes. This is an exhibit 80 years in the making, featuring all the incredible Marvel characters that you know and come to love through the comic strips and the movies. So check us out, November 26th, Thanksgiving weekend, all the way through the end of May. I hope to see you here. It's going to be a marvelous event. All right, with that, let me share my screen and get to today's incredible program called The Color of Science. So here we go. Put this up here. First of all, as always, we got to thank the people that make this show possible, and that is our sponsors. So first of all, COSI Connects, that is our digital portal to a universe of science. That is COSI's incredible web-associated content, all correlated to Ohio Science Learning Standards and Next Generation Science Standards. So if you're a parent or a teacher or a kiddo, know that the content you're getting from COSI's website is really great science learning content. Second of all, I want to thank Battelle and L Brands, who are our presenting sponsors. And then of course, our lead funder, the Curtis T. and Beverly Jewell Family Fund, also CAS, Honda, and KeyBank, and as well, Garvey Institute has been supporting this program. Now, as you know, the Color of Science program is really to celebrate the amazing men and women that make science come alive in our world. And it's really to underscore the point that all scientists aren't old men with thick glasses and pocket protectors, but that women make fantastic scientists and engineers, and so do persons of color. And so today, you know, we are branching out and bringing in incredible people. You've seen the many guests we've had, but where we haven't focused in the past is actually the amazing scientists and engineers and educators we have here at COSI. And so with that, we couldn't be more excited to have today's interview with none other than Miss Laurie Miller, who's the Senior Manager of Living Collections and COSI's Animal Care Expert. Now, most of you, and I gotta go to the script here because her CV is incredible. You know, most of you may not know that animals actually live at COSI. And those animals need care by an expert who knows all about their needs. Well, Miss Miller is the Senior Manager of Living Collections at COSI, and she's been leading COSI's wild experience, which she's going to get into, for almost a decade. With a bachelor's degree in science from The Ohio State University and previous experience in the zoological field, seasoned with equal parts ambition, tenacity, and humor, she's accrued over 20 years of experience in the animal care field. Ladies and gentlemen, with no other way of saying this, I present to you Miss Miller, our incredible animal care expert at COSI. I'm going to unshare my screen, invite her on. Miss Miller, thanks for being with us today, and you can share the screen and give us a little presentation.
Hello. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I am thrilled to be here, honored and humbled, and I'm excited to share my story and a little bit about what I do here. So a lot of times people always ask, oh, there's animals at COSI. So I thought I would go ahead and share my presentation about what I do here and then how I got here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
You got it. And while you share your screen, we're going to hear from her presentation. Then, as you know, I do my usual one-on-one Q&A with Laurie, and then we open it up to questions from all of you. Some were submitted early in advance. We'll read those, and then we'll pull from the chat. Miss Miller, you are up.
All right. So the big question is why, right? So why work with animals in a professional career? And I think it's the big why and the most important thing that we can ask. So it's going to get heavy real fast, but I promise it's going to get better because this is a message of hope and inspiration. All right. So the big question is why? So we are entering the planet's 6th mass extinction, all right, which is wholly brought on by human hands. And humans have never lived through an extinction event before. So we really don't know what to expect. And to be frank, there's no assurance that we're going to get through it. Okay. So hang with me. Figuring out how to halt that process and reverse it. It's within our grasp. We are a very creative species, but it's going to need the global community and all of the resources we have to be able to facilitate opportunities for creative minds in order to get there. So we need to think about this together. So in short, I want to change the world. So I'm ambitious and I'll strive for the impossible whenever possible. And I'm very fortunate to work for an institution that makes the impossible possible. So a little bit about what I do and what the COSI connection is. Here at COSI, the living collection is built around the CRED model. So conservation, research, education, and discovery. So the conservation and research piece, we work collaboratively with local institutions and agencies to help facilitate the research that they do, but also to present that to our guests so that we can give them some exposure for what is happening in our community. Some of the things that we have done is work with the mussel research facility that's out by the Columbus Zoo. The work they are doing is incredible. So they are doing in vitro fertilization of mussels. And I know they just look like rocks. You're looking at that picture and they just look like rocks. But listen, they are the most endangered organism in North America, and they keep our waterways clean. So the impact that they have for our environment is invaluable. And we need to figure out why they're disappearing and figure out how to get those younger mussels in there so that they can keep reproducing. So the in vitro fertilization is incredible, and I love talking about it. We also have our Hellbender, which is a part of multiple entities or part of that conservation effort. And what they do is they collect the eggs in the wild and they rear them in a captive environment, and then they release them to give them a better chance. And so we are very fortunate to be able to display one of those, to be able to talk about that research effort. And then the other pictures here are us going out with the fabulous Mark Kibbe, who works at the Museum of Biological Diversity, and he's doing wonderful work over there. And here we're actually collecting specimens for our display, and specifically mosquito fish, which is an invasive species that we as humans introduced to different areas across the world. So it's the #1 introduced species everywhere. And as their name suggests, they eat mosquito larvae, which we hate mosquitoes. I get it. We really don't want them around, but they actually produce all sorts of health problems in different countries that are very deadly. So to have a fish that people thought would eat those larvae to help save human lives was a really big thing. But what we're seeing is it's having a really huge impact on our native populations of fish that do the very same thing. So I'm getting lost in this slide already. I could talk about this stuff forever. It's so much fun. But being able to partner in these types of research is really going to impact the future and what we're able to do moving forward. So conservation research, education. So we have this wonderful collection of exotic animals, and we are able to provide a vet resident the opportunity to oversee their own exotic animal collection as a part of their program. So with OSU, our vet resident sees our collection in their first year. They go out to the Columbus Zoo for their second year, and third year they're out at the wild. And we are able to offer some really cool opportunities for them, and we see some really cool things as well. We also have a vet resident partnership with OSU Medical Center, specifically for our rats. So over in the research field, the rats over there don't live very long, unfortunately. So having our rats here at COSI, where they live really nice long lives, allows those residents to have the opportunity to be able to see aged rats and sort of those end of life stages. And so it gives them a more robust experience in their residency. In addition to that, we get interns and work study students and volunteers, and they all come in and they learn things like animal husbandry, so how to take care of the animals, animal training using operant conditioning with our rats, which is just really fun because they're crazy smart. Presentation skills. So doing the informal education piece and getting comfortable speaking in front of an audience, record keeping, enrichment, which is so important when you're working with a population of animals that are in human care, making sure that they've got the best lives, right? And then that last piece, discovery. So here at COSI, we do this in 3 different ways. We do off-site programming, we do on-site programming, and online as well. And there's lots of different formats that we can use for this. I'm showing you a few different examples here. We've got Mark Flint speaking up in the top corner about his research with alligator welfare. But we also move out to the schools, and I can't tell you, just popping into mind, we had this oceans exhibit, and I remember a kid coming up and saying, man, I didn't know seahorses were real. So being able to have that experience, like, yes, and here they are, and how cool is that? And that kid's never gonna forget that, right? So I get excited and passionate about this. I love what I do, and I can obviously talk about it for a really long time. But let's talk a little bit about how I got here. So growing up, always had animals. So here are a bunch of pictures. But I also loved other stuff too, right? Like I loved playing basketball. I love art. I love writing. I love adventure. I love learning. So my path to my career was not direct. I spent a lot of time exploring different avenues, different interests that I have. So I'm going to touch base with just a couple of the things that influenced how I ended up in my career. And like I said, I had animals growing up, which included a horse for most of my impressionable years, and then also a cow. We had a cow, 1 cow, and you'll appreciate this, Frederick. So she went to the Canadian Royal, which is in Toronto. I grew up in Canada, and she won. She won Grand Champion Simmental at the Royal, which is a big deal. And so this 1 cow, we then wanted to make more of. And so I was very young when we had her, and I remember going to bed in my clothes because we needed to go make sure she had her baby safely. And I'll tell you, I remember in 1st grade drawing pictures in my journal for school of a cow with feet coming out of their rear end. Because that was my experience. I was seeing something that left an impression on me, as it should. So you have the picture of her down there. In the middle there's a picture of me holding that snake. And that is at a place called Jungle Larry's. And that is now the Naples Zoo. So they've become accredited, and it's a really amazing institution. But let me tell you, Jungle Larry's, when I went there, I went to this presentation and they called up 2 volunteers. We didn't know what we were going to do. And then they came around the corner with these 2 snakes. And I had never handled a snake before. I don't know that I really knew how I felt about snakes. What I do know is that the girl that was standing with me was not as thrilled about this as I was. So but I was so excited, and I got to hold a snake for the first time, and I got to present it. So I felt kind of honored to be able to do this cool thing. And you don't forget an experience like that. You know, this is what is building those connections. And next time I saw a snake in the world, there's this curiosity, this adventure to that was stimulated by this experience that I got at Jungle Larry's. It's funny to call it that. Anyway, another one is going to SeaWorld, right? I went to SeaWorld and I saw those orcas for the first time. And I understand that this can be something that's controversial to talk about right now, but you cannot deny, if you go and see that animal, you have feelings about that animal and you're very passionate about it, which is why we're having these conversations. So I can say, we are really trying to get the word out about vaquitas, which are one of the most endangered whale species and are, I think, functionally extinct. I could be wrong, but there's so few of them left. But getting the message out is hard because people don't have that connection. So if you talk about an orca, people are very opinionated about how they feel about orcas, but it's because of those experiences, right? So that stayed with me, and those orcas specifically, which are to this day some of my favorite animals. I had a take your kids to work day opportunity, and I actually went with a friend's parent to a vet lab, and we were culturing milk, and we were staining tissue samples and making slides, and they even had a cow that they had to do a necropsy on. So they needed to figure out why that cow died so that they could inoculate the rest of the herd to save the rest of the herd. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, she was pregnant at the time, and my friend's dad was really into showing me all of this. So yes, I walked into a room, there's a dead cow. That's kind of jarring when you're younger. But when he started opening up that cow and he's showing me the different stomachs and the different tissues that are in there, and then you see the baby and the sponge around the uterus, and I promise you, he took the head into a back room and he sliced it in half, which has all sorts of sounds that you can probably imagine. But seeing the cross section of the head of that cow and how all of that works. And I think it was at that moment that I knew I was a little bit different because I took that experience and I was like, this is awesome. This is something that I'm really interested in, right? So all of these touch points are kind of building and teaching me about myself and teaching me about the things that interest me and my passion about the world around me. And it would be a miss if I didn't show you this guy. So I remember the exact spot I was standing the first time I ever saw Steve Irwin. And I don't think there's anybody who doesn't know him or is not affected by the work that he's done, which is now through his children. But his enthusiasm is infectious, and his love for species that are misunderstood, and to relay the message of how important it is to save these species too. So they're not cute and cuddly, it's not a panda, but the species is still really important for us as a human species. And so that guy right there, I even remember going to my advisor in college, and I still wasn't sure what to do with this passion for animals. And I said, you know, I want to be Steve Irwin. How do I do that? And the blank look that I got, we got there eventually. But yeah, this guy played a huge part in the direction that I went. So how did I do it? I actually started out at Columbus State. So I was an immigrant from Canada, which made tuition prices triple what they normally are. So I wanted to start out at the Ohio State University, but I couldn't afford it. So, but what that did do was it afforded me the opportunity to explore a little bit. So I started at Columbus State as an art major, but I was able to take lots of different classes because it was cheaper, and honestly, some of the best teachers I had in my collegiate experience. I loved Columbus State. And my husband jokes that there's lots of people in this world that have gone to school as long as I have. They're called doctors. But I loved it. I loved learning new things, and it didn't all fit together for a degree, but I started learning more about myself and what it is I wanted to do. So all of those credits were transferable when I did decide to go to OSU. And while I was at Columbus State, I got a job at the zoo. I knew I wanted to be there, but unfortunately, to work with animals in a professional setting, you have to have experience working with animals in a professional setting. It's this horrible catch-22 that's very frustrating when you're beginning your career. And so what I did is I got a job landscaping. I got a name as a good worker. And then I was very fortunate that my boss, Steve, at the time referred me to the fabulous Kevin Hills, who oversaw the Wings of Flight program. You can actually still see Kevin Hills. He's The Secrets of the Zoo, the Bronx edition. He's the bird nerd over there. I'm so thankful for him giving me my first foot in the door with animals. And it's there that I began learning about operant conditioning, positive reinforcement, animal handling, animal welfare, the nuance of informal education, and how fun it is to work with people that are like-minded like you. So super positive experience. And it's there too that I also met that bird over there, Lurch. Was one of my favorite animals of all time. And I think part of that too is that he's not everybody's favorite. And he kind of chose me. So I had the opportunity to introduce people to animals that, again, it's the Steve Irwin effect, right? That people don't necessarily automatically connect to. And so that they may not leave loving him, but they would have a better appreciation for his value, so that you can protect them when they are in the wild and you see them. So I worked for a few different departments when I was at the zoo. They were all lateral moves because, as I mentioned, this is a super competitive field. And so I was sort of at this crossroads of I would have had to move to another state in order to advance my career. I was looking to advance my career, but I didn't want to move. So I had that experience. I actually worked at the medical center for a little while when I was at OSU, because free school, if you didn't know that. But I loved it. I loved seeing the doctors and how they worked. And I was specifically doing dermoscopic photography, where we were taking images of lesions and submitting them for research to see that if you could diagnose cancer through a picture instead of having to do a biopsy. I was really interested in that. So the doctor that I was working with was amazing, and she was super encouraging for me going back to school so that I could work more closely with her in her research. And then this little unicorn of a position popped up here at COSI. And I remember applying for this job. It was sort of do I go back to med school, or maybe I could do this amazing job? And they do not show up all the time. I was so excited. And another shout out to Courtney Price, who gave me the opportunity and believed in me for this position. And that, as they say, is history. So that's how I ended up here. And I want to bring it back to this. So we have little me with a snake for the first time ever. We've got middle me working at the Columbus Zoo, being able to present to kids in the exact same way that I learned. And then today, and I'm going to introduce you to one of the snakes that I get to work with. Your favorite, right, Frederick?
A little worried about this.
There he is. So this is Montoya. He's a boa constrictor, and he gets that name if you can see his little mustache there. But it's sort of this beautiful end cap of that. Not only do I get to present snakes, but I loved basketball. I train rats to play basketball. It's not what I envisioned, but it's all of my loves. I get to write. I get to be creative. I get to incorporate all of those interests that I had in this one position, and it's a dream. It's awesome. So there he is.
Wow. Before you put our bow away, how long and how heavy is Montoya?
That is a really great question. He is probably close to 6 feet at this point. So females get bigger, so they'll get about 10 feet. And he is about 10 pounds of pure muscle. So he is running away on me here.
Wow.
And it's having these experiences, right? So there's lots of people like yourself who are not fans of snakes. And I'm not under the impression that after they have an experience with Montoya, they're going to love snakes. Like, some people just don't like snakes. Like, I get it. But what I'm trying to instill is how important they are for our environment, how scary they're really not, and they're not really that dangerous to us, and to protect them, right? So how can we live, especially venomous snakes, who really just want to be left alone, but people will kill all snakes because they're afraid it might be venomous and they can't tell the difference, right? But what if they knew what venomous snakes looked like and they felt confident in that? And that's something that we can teach, right? So that's him.
I absolutely love that. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Ms. Laurie Miller, who is the animal care expert at COSI. Yes, the Center of Science and Industry. We're listening to The Color of Science, another great digital program with an incredible scientist and expert, in this case, sharing all things animals. So Laurie, thank you for that incredible kind of historical perspective. I want to pick up kind of where you started and then where you ended, because many people watch the show. We talk about COSI present stuff for people from the womb to the tomb, but the Color of Science is really bonded well with elementary, middle, and high school students who are looking at mentors like yourselves, etc. And one of the things you said at the beginning, which you followed up at the end, and I just want you to talk a little bit more about it, is your very diverse interests. I mean, yeah, sure, you loved animals, but you clearly loved art. You love writing, you love literature, you love sports, including basketball. And it was okay to have many different interests. And then as you navigated kind of through your teenage years and you kind of got closer to animals, but it's come back and you talked about your career at COSI where you still get to visit all those things, including coaching rats to
Right.
basketball. So just from a mentorship perspective, just talk a little bit more about how it's okay to have many different interests and still navigate your way as you pick a career.
Yeah, absolutely. So I find too, exploring is one of the best things that you can do. So I'm actually, well, we'll get to that in a minute, but having all of these interests, you really do want to explore. You want to see what's out there. Did I know that there was rats that play basketball? Absolutely not, right? And who knew that it would fit in some way? And that's what I did love about Columbus State. But being able to do different things will help you navigate, especially when college is so expensive. You kind of want to be sure about the direction that you want to go. So we will get interns that come in that are pre-vet. And oftentimes they'll switch their major because they realize that there's different things you can do with animals. It doesn't have to just be a vet. Oh, you like animals. Are you going to be a vet? We kind of instill that in kids, right? And so to see that there's an education piece, there's a zookeeper piece, there's a research piece, there's going out into the field, there is endangered species propagation, there is the park system, you know, like there's so much. And even if you like animals and you love computers, like animal institutions need computers, right? So you can sort of incorporate what you love and combine your interests for that. You love design, you like architecture. I mean, we need to build enclosures for these animals, you know, and nutrition, animal nutrition. There's so many ways that you can incorporate what you love.
No, that's fantastic. And that's such a great message that, again, loving animals could lead to dozens, if not hundreds of different career opportunities for you. Let's pick up with what you just said at the very end. Nutrition plays a role. Please, for the audience that has not seen rat basketball, in about a minute long, explain, when you say rats play basketball, people are like, yeah, no, I don't really get it. Walk us through, what's rat basketball about?
You've got it. If you've never seen rat basketball, you need to check it out. But rat basketball is a really fun way for us to teach people about operant conditioning or positive reinforcement. And they really do play basketball. So we have a little ball for them. They pick it up, they put it in the hoop, and then we give them a treat. So it's a multi-layer step process to train them how to do this. So it's a very complicated behavior for an animal. I promise you, I've trained lots of different animals, and rats are one of the smartest. They are just so intelligent. They really are thinking through those problems, and it's very satisfying to train them because they can learn a single behavior in a single day. And so what that looks like is we give them a reward. And for rats, they love food. So they will try different things. And as soon as they do the behavior that I'm looking for, I will reward them for that. And we do use clicker training, if you're familiar with that. So you have that bridge. And so we will break that process up into smaller steps for them. And we do each step at a time to get them to the point where they're actually playing basketball with each other. And we give them Toasted Oats.
And about how long does it take from the time you get a rat to train it to actually take the ball and put it in the hoop?
That's a great question. So we've been playing rat basketball here at COSI for 36 years. And one of the trainers, when I first came into COSI, told me that way back when he brought rats home with him and was training them multiple times a day, and it was just him, and he was able to train those rats in as little as 2 weeks. Now I can say, which is incredible.
A lot faster than I learned to play basketball, that's for sure.
So rats, like people, some are better at basketball than others, but also that's not necessarily what we see anymore. So we have multiple people that are training them, and we're training them about once a day just because that's where it fits into our schedule. So you're looking at closer to 2 months before our rats are actually starting to play.
Wow, still. Well, listen, I've been playing basketball for a decade, and I'm not nearly as good as the rats that we have on the COSI floor. So, okay, you talked about the rat basketball at COSI. Again, we're at the Center of Science and Industry. You're listening to the Color of Science Digital Edition. I have the pleasure of interviewing Laurie Miller, our animal expert at COSI. Now, you showed us the snake. You talked about rat basketball. We're a science museum. You mentioned it early, but how many animals do we actually have at COSI?
That's a great question. We have a little bit of everything. I think right now our collection is sitting around 50 different species. Now, because of the pandemic, we just haven't brought any new ones in, and we're sort of reimagining what the future of this collection looks like. But we have lots of different species. So we've got amphibians and birds and mammals and reptiles, clearly, arthropods, different types of bugs. And it's really nice. So for our students, if they're coming in, they're getting a touch point for one of each type of different animal. We also have fish as well, saltwater and freshwater.
Okay.
And so it's that really nice contact point that you're sort of seeing the behavior and learning how to care for those animals.
That's fantastic. So that's a lot of animals that 50. I mean, again, ladies and gentlemen, COSI has over 50 species of animals in this great science museum, and they're all taken care of by Miss Miller. So that's at COSI, but your animal career, spans about 20 years. So without naming everyone, like what's that spread? What types of animals have you cared for throughout this vast career?
That's a great question. So I've actually taken care of over 150 different species, and that again ranges across all the different types of animals. Some of my favorite to care for were birds. So that includes birds of prey and parrots, flamingos, cranes, kookaburras, and my favorite of all time are crows. So the corvid family, they're just so intelligent and fun. And but some other things that I took care of are a baby camel, which was an interesting
baby camel.
one.
Where did you take care of? Where did you get a baby camel?
His name was Carmel. There's nothing, bottle feeding a baby camel in the middle of the night is just a whole new level. We had a venomous Gila monster that was a part of one of our exhibits that we had here. I've worked with two-toed sloths, bamboo sharks, alligators, and another noteworthy one is a coatimundi. And if you don't know what a coatimundi is, it looks like a raccoon from South America. And we got them as babies. And so again, you have to care for them 24 hours a day. So when you're not at work, you bring them home with you when you're able to do that. And I was freshly married and in this new marriage, and my husband is a dog guy. All right. And I bring home these little baby coatimundis, and you couldn't give them a bottle because they would just chew the nipples off the bottles. So they kind of ate their pablum really fast, which sometimes upset their stomach. And I remember very distinctly, like putting it on his shoulder, like, look how cute this is. And it just like vomiting down his back, and him just picking it up and handing it to me. And he's like, I'm going to go have a shower. Like you just have these experiences with these little animals and you're building these relationships with them. So it's hard to pick a favorite. It really is.
That is incredible. What a diverse series of experiences. All right. You've been leading COSI's Wild Experience for about 9 years, right? What's it like to lead the animal care in general, and then specifically inside the Science Museum? So you do stuff both behind the scenes, of course, taking care of the animals, but you're also out front in the face of COSI doing shows and demonstrations. What is it like?
It's a great question. So leading the animal care, again, is a dream job. I love it. And being with people is another aspect. I'm social, and I like meeting new people and having those experiences with them and having those first time experiences where they're willing to hold a snake for the first time and being a part of that. But working at a science institution in that capacity is amazing. So we're able to combine all of the sciences in one place, and we're surrounded by experts in their field. And everyone is passionate about what they do. And again, their excitement is infectious. So being able to collaborate with them brings fresh new ideas to the table and opportunities to expand our understanding of the animals that we care for. So a great example of this is Joe Wood, who is our resident paleontologist. He is so excited about paleontology. And if I want to know how my chicken is a dinosaur, he will tell you in great length about why that chicken is a dinosaur. And you're going to leave and you will remember that experience. But it's something that you don't necessarily get to talk to in different places that offer these experiences. So we're sort of bringing all of the sciences together, and it's sort of a collaboration of minds, which is so fun.
That's fantastic. So folks, as we get close to Thanksgiving, Think about the connection between chickens, turkeys, and dinosaurs. If you're unsure, come visit Laurie Miller or Joe Wood at COSI and see our dinosaur exhibit. You'll learn all about that connection. So Miss Miller, again, for those of you who are just tuning in, this is the Color of Science Digital Edition. I'm interviewing COSI's animal expert, Miss Laurie Miller. I want to combine two questions here. So what skills, you talked about all the passions you had growing up, but now that you're doing this, as you said, dream job, what actual skills does one need for animal care? And combine that with what advice would you have for young people who are watching today who really love animals and want to make it a career like yourself?
Yeah, so you can have all the skills in the world, but if you do not have a degree, it's very difficult to work with animals in a professional setting. So number one, you're going to want to get your bachelor's degree. With that said, there's lots of different avenues you can take, like I mentioned. So some people do start out as pre-vet, but you can also do things like zoology, biology, fisheries. My degree is specifically in environment and natural resource. And so after you get that degree is going to allow you to apply for those jobs. And it's hard to hear because you're going to learn a lot of really great information and you just spent a ton of money and a ton of stress and a ton of your time on that degree. But everybody applying has a degree. So what's going to separate you from everybody else is the hands-on experience that you have in that field. So as much as you can, you want to get out and get that hands-on experience. Do internships if you're able to. Do volunteer experiences. Get to network and meet people. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I have a slide for this. But in addition to that, for your skill set, you need that intuition. When you are working with animals, you are building those relationships and they can't necessarily always talk to you. So you are going to learn how to read animal behavior, but a little bit of that has to be built in, right? If you're an animal person, you sort of are able to read your animals to know if there's something wrong. A good work ethic. You have to work hard in this business. It is so competitive that even your internships and your volunteer experiences, you want to make sure those are solid because there are a lot of people trying to get these jobs. And you need that flexibility. Animals need to be fed and cared for 365 days a year. So Christmas, I'm going to be here Christmas Eve and I'm going to be here for Thanksgiving, making sure that our animals are taken care of. And I'm thankful to have a husband and family that support me to do that. You need attention to detail and your support system, right? I just mentioned it. Wasn't going to talk about it, but you need a good support system. You need people that are supportive of what you're doing. And then ability to work well with the animals in your care and the people that you're working with. So you can love animals and you can just be so passionate about them. But if the animals don't like you, that makes it really hard, right? So, and I think that's why I liked birds so much, because birds can be very particular about the keepers that are taking care of them. And they chose me for whatever reason. Like I work well with birds, and I think because they chose me, I chose them. So they're one of my favorite to work with. So
that's fantastic. I mean, that sounds like a nice list of different things, but they're all doable and possible, which is wonderful. And I want to start with the first point is, yes, you need a degree, but you can have a degree in many, many, many fields. So again, whatever you're passionate about, that's okay. Get that degree, but then do all the other things Ms. Miller said, who, by the way, is the avian species chosen one. We now know that that's your new name from us. You're the chosen one according to birds. All right. So these are my questions, but as you know, the Color Science, we like to get audience questions. We have a bunch of questions submitted from the audience in advance. I'm going to read through some of those, Ms. Miller, and then I'm going to go to online here, and we have some in the chat that I'll read. So the first one comes from Dominic, age 6. Dominic is homeschooled, and he asked the classic question you probably get all the time, and you can't cop out by saying I don't have one. What's your favorite animal?
This is the hardest question I get, I promise you. And I am being 100% honest. My dog Cranberry is my favorite animal, and she's the best. There's a reason that pets make really great pets. But if you want to talk about wildlife, I can't just limit it to one. So in general, like I said, orcas and whales are really high on my list. I always wanted to be a marine biologist because of those experiences. So they're one of my favorite. Crows, like I mentioned before, they're so smart. And octopi. I am fascinated with octopi.
I like calamari, but that's as far as I go.
Listen, they are so cool. All of our DNA is so similar to everything else, but our DNA is more similarly related to a dandelion than an octopus. I heard somebody say that if you look at their genes, it looks like somebody like took them and put them in a jar and shook them up because they don't look like anything else. They truly are alien and so cool. Anyway, I like them. And then like in terms of specific wildlife, lurchies, my boy. I love that turkey vulture. I really do.
Well, Dominic, I hope that answered your question, but Miss Miller was faithful to her beloved pet cranberry. We gotta recognize that. All right, Sierra, age 12, she wants to know, and you talked a little bit about this, so you can kind of say it again in maybe 30 seconds. How do you train the rats to play basketball?
Yeah, so positive.
And you mentioned the clicker. Maybe if you can explain the clicker for the audience, and that'll be helpful.
Cool. So it's positive reinforcement. So every time they do something that I want them to do, I reward them for that. So in our case, we like to give toasted oats, and the rats love toasted oats. So when we're talking about the bridge or the clicker, what happens is that's the first training we do. So we want them to associate that clicking sound with that positive reinforcement, or to know that that treat's going to come. And what that does is it allows us to let them know right away when they're doing the behavior that we want them to do, and then we can treat them after. So it makes it a quicker connection. So it's sort of like Pavlov's dogs, right? Like the bells, so the saliva. You probably haven't heard of that, but basically his research made it so every time those dogs heard those bells, they would start salivating because they knew that that bell meant that they were going to get really yummy food. So similar thing.
So okay, wait a minute. Let's unpack this. So you first train with the clicking. So you feed them this kind of honey nut Cheerio or whatever your little treat is, and you click. And so every time they hear the click, they know they're getting a treat, correct? Okay, so you got that part. Well, how do you go from that part to then getting them to pick the ball up and put it in the hoop? Because they're not, yeah.
So the first thing we do is we'll put them in the court and we'll give them lots of treats because we want them to know that that's an awesome place to be. And then we'll introduce the ball. And so a lot of it is trial and error. So they're going to run around the court and eventually their nose is going to touch that ball. And when it does, I'm going to make a clicking sound, and they've already been conditioned. So they're going to come back and get a treat. And they're like, wait a minute, that got me a treat. So they're going to go back and they're going to try it again. And I'm going to give them a treat for that. So, and then you can start moving it around. So then we add a platform that all they have to do is sit on the platform and knock the ball into the hoop. And again, it's that same, as soon as they figure it out, they're going to get that click and that treat. But it is, sometimes there's different parts of it that are more frustrating for them. And so it sometimes takes a little bit longer, or you sometimes have to try some different techniques to get them to figure it out. But for the most part, rats are really smart. So they pick it up pretty quickly.
You got it. And Miss Miller, by the way, the amount of times I had to practice doing the layup to get it in, I'm very sympathetic to if it takes the rats a little bit of time to get.
I've got lots of Cheerios if you want to.
There you go. All right. Andre C, he's 8 years old. Again, you talked a little bit about this, but what are some animals that live at COSI? But what I'll do is I want to combine that question with a question that came online from Sandra, which is, because you did talk about some of the animals we do have. Sandra wants to know, do we have plans to get any new animals in the future that we haven't had before at COSI?
That's a really great question. So,
like, don't surprise the president.
Well, I can't talk too much specifics about the future, but so for animals that we do have our snakes and our turtles, and we have lizards and some anoles that you can see in our Cuba exhibit. We've got fish, we've got that hellbender that I was talking about. Behind the scenes, we have an owl, we have that chicken. So we have a pretty diverse collection here. And in terms of bringing in new animals, you want that to be very strategic and intentional. So we are reimagining what this department is and what it's going to do. And these conversations are very exciting, I have to tell you. And you're not going to want to miss what's going to come next because it's going to be awesome. But what I can tell you is that we are looking for new ways to tackle the big why. So we want to expand our global network. We want to connect the amazing work that's already being done to people so that they can see the work that's being done, contribute data and resources to the scientific community, and expand the learning opportunities for the students. And of course, expand opportunities for people to connect with the animals the way that I've been talking about this whole time. So what we're doing is we're setting the foundation for something that's going to be much bigger than myself, and hopefully have that global impact that is going to sustain. So we need that plan in place, and that will help us navigate the types of animals that we will have. And so it's a very intentional experience that people are going to have.
You got it. Can I put a lobby in for a camel? You said you had a one-hump camel at one point. Can COSI get a camel again? Is that possible?
Here's what I'll say about.
I'll give up my office space.
Bless all the people that work with camels.
Got it. Ladies and gentlemen, for those of you just tuned in, we are listening to Miss Laurie Miller. She is the Senior Manager of Living Collections at COSI. Yes, COSI, the Center of Science and Industry, the #1 science museum 2 years in a row by USA Today, has animals. And we just heard from our expert, Miss Miller, we have over 50 species of animals right here at COSI. So make sure you check them out next time you come. So my last question that was submitted early is from Sam H. He's 5 years old. And Sam wants to know, have you ever been hurt by an animal?
That's a good question. So let's say macaws have hurt me emotionally.
What's that?
Macaws have hurt me emotionally.
For those who don't know, what's a macaw? For those who don't know.
Macaw is a big parrot. So let me tell you.
So even, wait a minute. So even though the birds have called you the chosen one, the one you got hurt by was a bird, a parrot species named a macaw.
In my heart. So again, macaws and parrots, they have so much personality. And so they've got good days and bad days, just like we do. And I mean that jokingly. I mean, you're gonna learn your animals, and you have to not take it personally. I mean, really. But it's hard not to when you build these relationships and they've decided they just don't want to work with you for whatever day, for whatever reason, right? But professionally, in all seriousness, professionally, I've never really been hurt, or not that anything that sticks out in my mind. And part of that is it's our job to read the animal behavior. So we need to know if that animal is not feeling it, or if they're giving us warning signs, or if they're communicating something to us. And then it's our job to back off if we see those behaviors. And I mean, anything from a tarantula, just a little tiny bug, is going to give me warning signs. And so part of learning to work with these animals is learning all those different behaviors and being able to read it. Now, there was personally an incident with a squirrel that was in my fireplace that I tried to save. And that did not go well for my hand.
Wow, but that was at
home. I saved the
squirrel. That was at home though, so that would be with more of a wild animal, because that was an animal truly in nature. Okay, and I want to follow up on something you said. You talked about the macaw and the parrots. I'm sure people are wondering, can parrots really talk? Did you train your parrot to talk? What was that like?
That's a great question. So the behavior that people are talking about, and it does sound like they're talking, but what they're doing is they're mimicking sounds that they hear. Now they can use those words in context, right? So you might hear birds that are saying something at the right time, but that's because that's when they heard it. So macaws all have the ability to talk, and some just choose not to. So you never really know if you're going to get a macaw that can talk or not. But when they do, you want to watch what you say around them, because I've met lots of parrots that you just can't take out because it's a family environment and they know some really bad things.
That's really funny.
But again, just mimicking that behavior as they're adapting to their environment.
For sure. Folks, you're listening to The Color of Science, brought to you by COSI Connects, our digital portal to universal science. I'm speaking to Miss Miller, COSI's animal care expert. I'm going to go back to the questions that are currently in our stream here. So Sarah, who's 7 years old, and I don't know if you have our boa behind you, but those of you who weren't here, Miss Miller took out this massive boa constrictor. And so Sarah wants to know, why don't snakes have legs? She's 7 years old.
Oh, That's a really good question. Okay, so it has to do with evolution. And what's really, really cool about snakes is they can survive really well without legs. They don't need them. So they've evolved to not have legs. But there are some snake species that still have hip bones. So my boa that I brought out earlier, and I'll bring him out again so you can see him, they still have those hip bones, but my python downstairs does not. And so you have just these different levels of evolution that you can see clearly through these snake species. But the bottom line is they don't really need them. So all of us in these different body types that we see with animals have evolved different ways of surviving in their environment. A really cool thing is that you and I have a Jacobson's organ. So all reptiles.
What's a Jacobson organ?
I'm going to tell you.
All right.
In the roof of your mouth, above the roof of your mouth, is a little organ that snakes use to smell. So it's a part of the olfactory system. So what they do is they stick their tongue out, they get little molecules of air stuck on there, and then when they put it back in their mouth, they touch that hole in the roof of their mouth, which connects to that Jacobson's organ, which helps to analyze the molecules. You and I still have a Jacobson's organ in there, but we don't have a hole in it in our mouth. So it's just this vestigial organ that we don't use. And so just like the hip bones for the snake, he's not going to use those for anything. And eventually that Jacobson's organ will probably disappear because no one's using it, right? So it's really cool to be able to see those differences between species.
Very interesting. So this is a little bit of snake in all of us. I knew it all the time. All right. So Michael, and we're getting close to the end of the program, and then we got to get to our special art competition. Michael, age 13's got a really great question. Does COSI ever rescue animals?
That's a really good question, and the answer is yes. So we have a few native species that are a part of our collection. One of our fan favorites is our owl. Her name is Archimedes, and she does have one eye. So she was found in the wild and turned into the wildlife center with the intent to release her. But unfortunately, she couldn't catch live food, so she would starve if she was released. And we were very fortunate to provide a home for her here at COSI. And she's a great little bird. She is so tolerant of being around people, of loud noises in this environment. She's just such a great animal to have in our collection. With that said, our snakes are rescues. So people will get these animals as pets and just decide that that's not a good fit for them anymore. So we work with the rescue center to bring in those animals as much as possible.
Yeah, well, and just for the record, you're not going to get any snakes from me to rescue because I'm not getting any as pets. But I do want to get back to the name because you went through it real quickly. I know why our owl is called Archimedes. Can you share with the audience why we got that name?
So she totally outing me. So
great story.
We call her Archie because she's got one eye and she's a pirate.
So, folks, that's to make sure you understand that while we're very serious about taking care of our animal species, COSI, we also have a great sense of humor and we try to bring levity where we can. So we're getting close to the end of the program. What I want to do is share my screen again, Ms. Miller. I want to talk about the STEAM competition, and I want to come back and give you the last word. And the last word is going to be advice that you have for kiddos who want to be the next generations of people like you, or of the great Steve Irwin, or everybody else in the animal loving kingdom. So let me share my screen. Back here a second. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Color of Science digital edition brought to you by COSI Connects. I am speaking to none other than Miss Laurie Miller, COSI's animal care expert. As you know, at the end of the program, we always talk about our STEAM competition. That's science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And November's STEAM challenge, the theme, you know what's coming up. Obviously, it's about animals. So you can do any 2D, 3D, painting, drawing, anything that has inspired you. And you can see an actual real photo of the rats playing basketball right there on the screen. But anything that inspires you in the honor of Miss Laurie Miller, our animal care expert at COSI, send that to vbowers@cosi.org. That's Miss Vanessa Bowers. She is in charge of our incredible program, The Color of Science. She's the brains and bronze behind this program. Submit your photo of art to vbowers@cosi.org. The deadline is 1 month from today, so you have 4 weeks to do that, and you have the chance of third prize. You will win some of the amazing COSI Connects kits, As second prize, you will get a hologram machine, which is really cool. And then first prize, you get an iPad mini. So again, please submit your Miss Miller inspired animal art to vbowers@cosi.org, and we'll definitely pull out winners in months to come. With that, I want to come back, unshare my screen. Oh, have to mention, check out QED with Dr. B. This is a partnership between WOSU, the PBS affiliate, and COSI that brings you a science television show, really unpacking important things in science for people of all ages. So with that, I want to come back to Miss Miller, our guest for today, taking the Color of Science digital series to the next level. This is such an amazing interview. For you, what are your last words? What are your last comments for everybody watching, especially the younger generation that wants to think of doing stuff like you?
You got it. I'm going to share my screen real quick because this is important stuff. So explore those opportunities, get as much experience as you can in the field, go meet the people, network. Let me tell you, networking is one of the most important things that you can do to make connections, to be able to build your career. So meet as many people as you can, go to those things, remember people's names, which is a really hard one for me. Write it down if you have to. But build those relationships with people. I can't tell you how many people that I've built relationships with that I've reached out and I'm like, hey, can you help me with this thing? And I already have that relationship. It's really easy and we can get things done really efficiently. And then the experiences, Coursera. Listen, there are so many classes on Coursera. It's free collegiate classes. Now it's not going to build towards your degree, but man, there's so much information there. So go check that out, get your free courses, and you can pay to get your little certificate. You can put it on your resume. It looks great. It's just more experience that you can add to your resume. You'll have more success if you're willing to relocate. There's just jobs, they pop up everywhere. But if you stay in the same place, it's really hard. Like I said, it's very competitive. So just know that about this career field as you're moving into it. And you can start participating in citizen science now. Citizen science is going to change how we do things. So download this iNaturalist app and you can go out and you can even just find plants. They don't run anywhere. You take a picture of it and what it does is it uploads it to a system that researchers can then use that data in building all of their research in their framework. So I use that one a lot. The other one that I use a lot is BirdNet. And again, you go out and you don't even have to see the bird. It actually records the sounds that you're hearing, and it will record exactly where you are, and it will send that information to the researchers so that they know where these animals are being found. If you have one researcher, it's really hard for them to do a large area, especially with funding issues that come with this field as well. So having the citizen science of the world go out there, use these apps, and it tells us where these animals are being found, and it helps us as we move forward. And I also want to move on to this guy. So Troy Paisley is a mentor of mine, and he was a former boss that I had at the Columbus Zoo. And let me tell you about this guy. Always an open door, still has an open door. So he has helped me through challenges in my career, some really hard times. And I promise you, if you've ever met him, you did not leave without laughing once, because he is just a natural comedian, but he's genius, he's ridiculously talented, and he leads by example. This is a person that you want to emulate. And so I want to thank you, Troy, for helping me through my career. A bit emotional, but get somebody in your life that is this encourager, that is able to help you navigate your career. And I promise you, if you find anybody like Troy, then you're doing something right.
That is terrific advice, heartfelt. Shout out to Troy Paisley, also to Steve Irwin, but also all the other amazing people that work with animals to help make them safe, make sure they have longevity, and be part of the human and world community. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to this great interview with Laurie Miller. Again, those of you who don't know, COSI has over 50 species of animals, and Miss Miller is in charge of all of them, her and her team. So when you think about COSI, make sure you check her out and or some of the animals we have here. That's getting to the end of our program. One last shout out. The gear I'm wearing is to celebrate that COSI is hosting Marvel, a universe of superheroes starting November 26th. That's Friday on Thanksgiving weekend through the end of May. With that, Miss Miller, thank you for doing what you do. As the president and CEO, I want to give you a huge thank you to say how pleased how pleased we are to have you part of our team. And lastly, I want to thank all the listeners and viewers from local, state, national, and out to our great country, Laurie. Those of you in Canada checking this out, thank you for your support as well. With that, have a safe and wonderful rest of your day, folks. Bye for now.